Entering this cave seemed far easier than finding a way back out. Little did this group of cavers know, they were about to face a terrifying situation where life and death hung in the balance, and their hopes would begin to fade. Here at the Faculty of Truth, we dive into the gripping story of a Mexican cave that trapped 4 cavers inside, leaving them fighting for survival with no clear way to escape. Viewer discretion is advised. On June 17, 1994, a group of seasoned cavers prepared for an ambitious and dangerous expedition through Mexico's famous but treacherous caves. Luis Jose, joined by Pete Squires, Dave and Steve Lester, planned to traverse from Cueva del Brinco to Cueva de Infiernillo using a high-risk route that was poorly understood. For Louise, this cave system wasn't entirely unfamiliar. She had explored it more than a decade ago. However, memories fade over time, and for the rest of the group, it was uncharted territory. Despite the challenges, their thirst for adventure pushed them forward. It was the rainy season, a time when sudden water surges could flood the cave, trapping them underground. The group was well aware of the dangers, but believed they could manage the risks. As they climbed the mountain toward the cave's entrance, Louise noticed water trickling from the springs along the cliffs. Though not immediately alarming, it hinted at recent rainfall and potentially unstable conditions. Even with this warning, they decided to press on, fully aware of the risks, yet determined to explore the unknown. At first, the cave felt almost welcoming. A cool breeze flowed through the entrance, and the low water levels promised clear pathways ahead. Feeling confident, the group pressed on, their flashlights cutting through the darkness with sharp, steady beams. The terrain was challenging but manageable. Tight passages that demanded focus, and the occasional climb that tested their skills. Each step took them deeper into the winding tunnels and vast chambers of the cave. The walls glistened with moisture, reflecting the light from their flashlights, while the steady drip of water echoed around them, creating an eerie but mesmerizing atmosphere. The first major challenge arose near the Titan Chamber, a massive cavern located in the heart of the cave. Louise struggled to find the correct route. After all, it had been 13 years since she last navigated these passages. The labyrinth of tunnels around the chamber was overwhelming, and hours of searching turned the group's initial excitement into mounting frustration. Each passage looked both familiar and foreign, but only one led to Cueva de Infiernillo. The rest were dead-end tunnels, dangerous with their narrow, twisted turns. To make matters worse, they noticed the airflow had stopped, a troubling sign. In well-ventilated caves, a gentle, cool breeze can usually be felt on the skin, but when it ceases, it often means something is blocking the circulation. Without air movement, navigating became even harder, and disorientation began to creep in. Despite their growing concern, the group pressed on. They retraced their steps, rechecked landmarks, and explored every possible passage, but their efforts were in vain. Exhaustion started to take its toll, and with no success in finding the correct route, they decided to rest. They settled on a large flat rock in the middle of the Titan Chamber and sat down, hoping that a brief break would restore their energy and sharpen their focus. But even after some time on the cold, hard floor, they still felt weak and unmotivated. Realizing their limits, they made a unanimous decision to turn back and abandon the route for now. The return journey should have been easier, but the cave had other plans. It seemed to change during their time inside. When the group reached a section known as the World Beyond, they were horrified to see how much worse the situation had become. A gentle trickle of water at the Hall of Angels had transformed into a raging waterfall. Paths that were dry on the way in were now slick and dangerous, with water pouring from the walls and ceiling. Louise was stunned. This was unlike any of her previous caving experiences. It felt as though an endless supply of water was being deliberately poured into the cave. As conditions worsened, the group faced narrow passages that were now rushing with water. They knew there was no choice but to push forward through these treacherous stretches. Each member carefully navigated the slippery rocks and battled the strong currents. Communication became crucial, with Louise often leading the way to scout out the safest routes. But no matter how careful they were, the challenges continued to mount. The water rose so high in one section that they had to tilt their faces toward the ceiling just to breathe. At a particularly tight passage leading out from the world beyond, they discovered the airflow had completely stopped. The rising water had reached the ceiling, leaving no room to pass. Louise, being the first in line, quickly tied a strip of flagging tape above the water to monitor the level. It was impossible to tell at a glance whether the water was rising or falling. She returned to the group and urged them to retreat, explaining that diving through the flooded passage was far too dangerous. Without knowing where the water ended or whether there would be enough air to continue, pressing on would be a deadly gamble. Feeling that waiting was their only option, the group settled in a sandy area near a junction in the cave, just before the world beyond. It was now 8 p.m., and they hoped the rising water would recede by morning. The group changed into dry clothes they had stored in waterproof backpacks and used their wetsuits as padding against the cold, hard ground. Their supplies were meager, just a few snacks, some water, flashlights, and a single rescue blanket. Huddling together for warmth, they tried to conserve energy and keep their morale intact. Time crawled in the damp, dark cave, with the sound of rushing water echoing endlessly through the passages, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. Conversations turned to lighter topics, happy memories, favorite foods, and other distractions to take their minds off their grim reality. At one point, Dave suggested returning to the Titan chamber to search for another way through the cave, but Louise insisted they stay and wait. She reasoned that if they couldn't find the path with their full strength earlier, trying again now, exhausted and drained, would only lead to failure or worse. Her steady resolve kept the group grounded, even as the hours stretched on. Time stretched endlessly, each moment blending into the next in the damp and oppressive darkness. To bring some order to the chaos, Steve began marking the cave wall to track how long they had been waiting. It gave them a sense of routine, however small, in the uncertainty. Though worried, the group remained calm, focusing on what they could control. By 3 a.m. on Saturday, June 18th, they noticed a faint breeze returning to the passage, a hopeful sign that the water was beginning to recede. Louise stayed vigilant, frequently checking the flagging tape she had placed to monitor any change in the water level. At 7 a.m., they measured the tape again and saw that the water had dropped by 42 centimeters. This small but crucial progress ignited a spark of hope among the group. They carefully inspected their gear, double-checked their plans, and prepared for another attempt to leave the cave. The sense of optimism, however cautious, gave them renewed strength to face the challenges ahead. Reluctantly, the group put on their wetsuits and prepared for the grueling journey ahead. The water was still high, and the currents were powerful. They had to navigate chest-deep water over slippery, uneven terrain, where every step was a gamble. One wrong move could mean being swept away, crushed against rocks, or lost underwater in tight crevices. Steve suggested waiting a bit longer, but the group agreed that waiting could lead to hypothermia, a dangerous condition where the body loses more heat than it can produce in the cold. Despite the overwhelming challenges, the group relied on teamwork and determination. They supported each other through the most treacherous sections, moving cautiously but steadily. Narrow passageways demanded precise movements, while steep climbs pushed their endurance to its limits. Louise, the most experienced among them, provided constant guidance and reassurance, while Dave and Steve used their strength to assist the others in crossing the toughest obstacles. After hours of battling the cave's harsh conditions, they finally saw a glimmer of daylight. Emerging from the cave, 49 exhausting hours after entering, was an overwhelming relief. The warmth of the sun and the fresh air were a stark and welcome contrast to the cold, damp darkness they had endured. Heavy rains from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Friday had flooded the area, leaving the cave entrance completely submerged. In other words, totally blocked by water and impassable. Later, they discovered an unsettling twist. If they had found the connection to Infir Nilo earlier, they might have been trapped in an even more perilous situation. The Infir Nilo entrance was also completely flooded, and they realized how fortunate they were to have avoided it. The experience was a harsh lesson in how unpredictable caves can be, especially during the rainy season. It was an ordeal that would stay with them for years to come. A vivid reminder of both the immense risks and the unique rewards of venturing into the unknown.